The year is 1900. A violent storm is raging across the Aegean Sea, forcing a small crew of sponge divers to seek desperate shelter off the rocky coast of a tiny, uninhabited island called Antikythera. They are waiting for the winds to die down, but the captain, unwilling to waste time, orders a diver named Elias to go down and check for sponges. Elias descends into the dark, churning water. Minutes later, he signals frantically to be pulled up. When he breaks the surface, he isn't holding sponges, he is hyperventilating. His eyes are wide with terror. He rips the regulator from his mouth and screams that he has found a heap of rotting corpses, a graveyard of naked women and horses on the ocean floor. The captain thinks the nitrogen narcosis has made him hallucinate. He puts on the suit and goes down himself. But Elias wasn't crazy. He had stumbled upon an ancient shipwreck littered with magnificent bronze statues that had been sleeping in the dark for 2,000 years. They hauled up the treasures, marble statues, jewelry, coins, but amidst the gold and bronze, they brought up something else. It was a calcified green lump of corroded metal. It looked like garbage, but as one diver held it, he noticed something strange about the weight, something about the shape. Whatever was inside that rock wasn't just old, it was wrong for its time. For 50 years, it sat in a museum basement ignored, until the wood cracked open and revealed a gear, a precision gear, cut with the accuracy of a modern clock dating back to a time before Jesus of Nazareth. It is known as the Antikythera Mechanism. It has been called the world's first computer. It is an object so advanced it disrupts the entire timeline of human history. It suggests that our ancestors possessed a level of technology that matched the Renaissance, 1,500 years before the Renaissance ever happened. And then they lost it. Welcome to Origin Archive. Today we are uncovering the ghost in the machine. Act 1. The Silent Artifact. When the treasures of Antikythera were laid out in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, the world was mesmerized. They had recovered the Antikythera youth, a stunning bronze statue. They found glass bowls, coins, and jewelry. These were the things museums wanted. These were the things that made sense. The corroded green lump? It was tossed into a wooden crate. As the years passed, the seawater inside the rock evaporated. The lump dried out and cracked apart. It looked like nothing more than a crushed handle or a piece of calcified debris. Archaeologists would walk past it every day, glancing at the faint outline of a circle embedded in the rust and assume it was just a wheel or a decorative piece of a shield. It was labeled simply Item 15087, and for nearly 50 years it remained silent. There is a strange psychology in archaeology. When we find something that doesn't fit our understanding of history, our first instinct is to reject it. We assume it is a mistake. We assume it is a contamination from a later time period. Because if it is real, it means our timeline is broken. Historians in the early 20th century were certain of one thing. The ancient Greeks were brilliant philosophers and mathematicians, but they were not engineers. They built temples, not machines. The idea of complex gears existing in 100 BC was laughable. It took a physicist to see what the archaeologists missed. In the 1950s, a British historian of science named Derek de Solla Price walked into the museum. He wasn't interested in the statues, he was interested in the anomaly. Price suspected there was more to the lump than met the eye, but he couldn't just hammer it open. The artifact was too fragile. One wrong move and it would crumble into dust. He needed to see inside without touching it. In 1971, Price teamed up with the Greek Nuclear Research Center Demokritos. They did something that had never been done to an ancient artifact before. They blasted it with high-energy gamma rays. As the images developed, the silence of the last 50 years was shattered. The X-rays didn't show a solid rock, they showed ghosts. Ghostly circles, overlapping and interlocking. They weren't just wheels, they were gears, and not just one or two crude cogs. The scan revealed layers of them, packed together with the density of a modern engine. Price counted 30 distinct gears inside a space no larger than a shoebox. The teeth of the gears were cut with 60-degree equilateral triangles, a level of precision that requires fine files and a lathe, tools that weren't supposed to exist in the ancient world. When Price looked at the images, he realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't a toy. It wasn't a simple calendar. It was a machine of staggering capability. He famously said that it was like opening an ancient Egyptian tomb and finding a modern jet engine inside. The question was no longer, "What is this?" The question had become something much more difficult to answer. If the Greeks had the technology to build this, why didn't they use it to build anything else? And more importantly, what exactly was this machine calculating? Act 2. The Clockwork Cosmos. To understand why this machine keeps scientists awake at night, we have to reconstruct it. We have to strip away the rust and the barnacles and see it as it was 2,000 years ago. Imagine a wooden box about the size of a large dictionary. On the front, a single bronze dial with Greek inscriptions. On the side, a hand crank. When you turn that crank, you aren't just winding a clock, you are moving the universe. Inside the box, those 30 gears engage in a complex dance. As the main drive wheel turns, it splits the motion. One set of gears calculates the position of the sun, another set tracks the phases of the moon. But it didn't just tell you where the moon was, it told you what the moon was going to do. On the back of the case, there were two massive spiral dials. One of them tracked the Saros cycle, a period of roughly 18 years used to predict eclipses. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a tool for navigation, it was a tool for prophecy. If you were a general planning a war or a politician planning an election, you could turn the crank forward 10 years and see exactly when the sky would go dark. The inscriptions on the dial even predicted the color of the eclipse, telling the user if the moon would turn blood red or pitch black, omens that could topple governments. But the true genius of the Antikythera mechanism isn't what it predicted, it's how it moved. Any clockmaker can build a gear that turns at a constant speed, tick-tock, tick-tock, but the heavens don't move at a constant speed. The moon speeds up when it gets closer to the Earth and slows down when it moves away. To replicate this mechanically requires a level of math that didn't exist in Europe until the 17th century. It requires differential gearing. Hidden deep inside the mechanism, researchers found a pin and slot device, a gear that sits slightly off-center with a pin that slides back and forth as it turns. You don't need to be a mathematician to grasp why this matters. It means the machine moves like the sky itself. It creates a motion that speeds up and slows down with every rotation, perfectly mimicking the elliptical orbit of the moon. This is the smoking gun. To build this, the creator didn't just need to be a master craftsman, they needed to understand gravity and orbital mechanics in a way that Isaac Newton wouldn't describe for another 1,700 years. We're looking at a device that combines the astronomical knowledge of the Babylonians, the geometry of the Greeks, and a mechanical engineering ability that rivals the industrial age. Imagine digging up a Viking grave from the year 900 and finding a working pocket watch inside. That is the scale of the anomaly we are dealing with. And this leads us to the most uncomfortable realization of all. Complexity like this doesn't appear out of nowhere. You don't wake up one morning, invent the gear, and then immediately build the world's most complex analog computer. Technology evolves in steps, which means somewhere in some dusty alley of Rhodes or Syracuse, there were workshops full of gears, tables covered in bronze filings, failed versions, broken attempts, and not one of them survived. No simpler gears, no earlier machines, just this one perfect, solitary object resting at the bottom of the sea. It is as if it fell out of the future. Act 3. The Missing Link. The existence of the Antikythera Mechanism creates a massive hole in the timeline of human progress. For centuries, we were taught that technology moves in a straight line. We start with stone tools, move to bronze, then iron, then steel, and eventually silicon. We assume that once a civilization learns how to do something, they never forget it. The Antikythera Mechanism proves that this is a lie. After the ship carrying this device sank around 60 BC, the technology didn't just stall, it died. The knowledge of how to cut precise differential gears vanished from the face of the earth. It wouldn't reappear until the mechanical clocks of the 14th century, a gap of nearly 1,400 years. Imagine if we lost the secret to electricity tomorrow and didn't figure it out again until the year 3400. That is what happened here. So where are the others? If you have a machine this perfect, this elegant, it cannot be the only one. Prototypes are messy. They are large, clunky, and full of corrections. The Antikythera Mechanism is small, sleek, and features miniaturized instructions on the panels. This bears all the hallmarks of a consumer product. It was likely a luxury item for the ultra-wealthy, the ancient equivalent of a supercomputer or a high-end Swiss watch. There must have been dozens, perhaps hundreds of them circulating in the Mediterranean. So why have we only found one? The answer is both simple and tragic. Bronze is recyclable. Throughout history, when an empire falls or a city is sacked, the first thing the conquerors do is loot the metal. Statues, tools, and yes, scientific instruments are thrown into the furnace. To a barbarian looting a Roman villa, a complex astronomical computer is useless, but melted down, it makes a fine helmet, or a sword, or a pot. History is written by the victors, but it is erased by the recyclers. The only reason the Antikythera Mechanism survived is because it was already lost. It was safe at the bottom of the ocean, protected by the crushing depth that no looter could reach. This leads us to a haunting what-if. We know the Greeks had the gears. We know they had the math. We also know from the writings of Hero of Alexandria that they had simple steam engines, spinning toys called aeolipiles. They were closer to an industrial future than we are comfortable admitting. But they didn't take that step. Some historians argue it was because of the economy. The ancient world ran on slavery. When you have unlimited human labor to do your heavy lifting, you have no incentive to build machines to do it for you. Technology requires a problem to solve, and the Greeks didn't see manual labor as a problem. They saw it as the natural order. So these brilliant minds used their genius not to build tractors or engines, but to build toys, to build clockwork curiosities that tracked the stars for the amusement of philosophers. The Antikythera Mechanism is a tombstone for a future that never happened. It is a monument to a civilization that was on the verge of unlocking the universe, but stopped just short of the finish line. Act 4. The Ghost of the Inventor. So who was the genius behind the gears? Who was the Einstein of the ancient world that held this knowledge in their hands? The mechanism itself gives us clues, etched into the bronze like a signature. When researchers analyzed the inscriptions on the calendar ring, they found something specific. The names of the months weren't just generic Greek, they were Corinthian. Specifically, they matched the calendar used in Syracuse, Sicily. Syracuse was the home of the greatest mathematician of antiquity, Archimedes. We know that when the Roman general Marcellus conquered Syracuse in 212 BC, he killed Archimedes, but he took back two specific items to Rome: globes constructed by Archimedes that supposedly modeled the movements of the planets. For centuries, historians read these accounts and dismissed them as myths. They thought the Romans were exaggerating to make their conquest look more impressive. But the Antikythera Mechanism suggests the myths were real. However, there is a catch. Archimedes died more than a century before this ship sank. This specific device wasn't built by his hands. It was likely built by his students, or a workshop that carried on his tradition. The trail leads us to the island of Rhodes, where the ship likely stopped before it sank. Rhodes was the Silicon Valley of the ancient world, a hub of astronomy and engineering, and here we find the final piece of the puzzle in the writings of the Roman philosopher Cicero. Cicero, writing in the 1st century BC, mentions a friend named Posidonius who had built a device. Cicero wrote, "If anyone were to take this sphere to Scythia or Britain, no one in those barbarous lands would doubt that that sphere was rational." He described a machine that with a single turn showed the sun, the moon, and the 5 wandering planets. We used to think Cicero was speaking metaphorically. Now we know he was being literal. The Antikythera Mechanism isn't just a random invention. It is the physical proof of a lost lineage of science. It connects the genius of Archimedes to the workshop of Posidonius, proving that for a brief, shining moment, humanity had the keys to the cosmos. And then, the ship went down, the workshop closed, the teachers died, and the lights went out. Conclusion: the fragility of knowledge. The recovery of the Antikythera Mechanism is a humbling reminder of our own fragility. We like to believe that knowledge is cumulative, that once we learn something, it stays with us forever. But history is not a staircase, it is a jagged line. It rises and it falls. Civilizations forget, technologies are lost, libraries burn. If those sponge divers hadn't decided to seek shelter from a storm on that specific day in 1900, we would still be confident in our ignorance. We would still be teaching in schools today that the Greeks were incapable of building complex machines. And remember Elias, the diver who came up screaming about a heap of rotting corpses? He was wrong. He hadn't found a graveyard of bodies. He had found a graveyard of forgotten ideas. It forces us to ask the question that keeps archaeologists awake at night. What else have we missed? What other technologies are lying in the mud of the Amazon, or buried under the sands of the Sahara, or rotting in the cargo hold of a ship deep in the Pacific? The ocean is deep and it is patient. It is the greatest archive of human history, and we have only opened the first page. Until we turn the next one, keep looking. This is Origin Archive. If you want to join us as we uncover the lost chapters of history, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. See you in the deep.